Coming up on Arirang News, as the counting continues, the Democratic candidate Joe Biden seems to be gaining the advantage in several battleground states. President Trump's campaign files lawsuits in 3 states, however, setting the stage to challenge the results. The Blue House says South Korea is going to maintain and strengthen its alliance with the U.S. regardless of who wins the election. The Moon administration is watching the race closely. And South Korea's financial markets brace for volatility in case the election drags on. The main thing investors want, it seems, is a clear winner. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. Results outstanding in several states in the U.S. presidential election, so neither Donald Trump nor Joe Biden have emerged as the clear winner. Biden does appear to be in the lead among the states that can be called. But the Trump campaign is mounting legal challenges in at least 3 states to gain access to the ballot counting process. Han Sung-woo has the latest.
Democratic candidate Joe Biden is leading the race to the White House. As of 3:30 p.m. Thursday, Korea time, CNN has Biden in front by 40 electoral votes with 253 to incumbent U.S. President Donald Trump's 213. Biden has been in the lead for quite some time, but earlier CNN projections had Trump ahead in most of the swing states, with Florida already won. But despite Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina all leaning slightly towards Trump, a transfer of power to Biden looks imminent now that the Rust Belt states of Wisconsin and Michigan in the Midwest have been won. Should Biden win in Arizona, all that is left to reach 270 is for Nevada, which accounts for 6 electoral votes, to turn blue. In this scenario, Biden wouldn't need a win in his home state of Pennsylvania, which currently favors Trump by roughly 160,000 ballots, with an estimated 89% of the votes in. Meanwhile, Trump's campaign on Wednesday local time started filing lawsuits and requested access to observe the tallying process in the battleground states following claims of election fraud.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop.
The Trump campaign wants to suspend ballot counting in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. And in Wisconsin, the president has asked for a recount. Quite some time may have to pass before the election's outcome is finalized, but for now, it's leaning heavily towards Biden. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea's presidential office says it's going to work to further develop the strong Seoul-Washington alliance no matter who wins the presidential election. The National Security Council also convened this afternoon, likely to discuss the developments and strategies the South Korean government may need to take depending on who leads the next administration. Kim Min-ji reports.
The presidential office of Cheongwade said Thursday that it will maintain South Korea's strong alliance with the United States regardless of the outcome of the U.S. presidential election. It also said the government will work to further develop the alliance and that Seoul will cooperate and communicate actively with Washington for denuclearization and peace on the Korean peninsula. In that regard, the National Security Council convened its regular session Thursday to discuss the election developments. The NSC has been closely following the vote count and preparing for all possible scenarios. It was followed by a meeting of related ministers to brief President Moon Jae-in on the results of the session. Details have not yet been disclosed. South Korea keenly awaits the outcome of the U.S. presidential election as it is expected to have an impact on several critical issues, including the denuclearization talks with North Korea and the defense cost-sharing negotiations between Seoul and Washington. President Moon has had no public schedules for the past 2 days, likely to focus on issues related to the election. South Korea's presidential office will likely remain reserved until the outcome is finalized, and in the meantime assess the impact on South Korea and the strategies it should take depending on which candidate takes the White House. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Uncertainty over the U.S. election could have a significant impact on financial markets around the world. That includes the South Korean stock market and the $1 exchange rate. Our Kim Jae-hee has the analysis.
South Korea is keeping a close eye on the U.S. presidential election. Uncertainty due to delayed results and the Trump campaign suing several states have raised concerns of volatility in the financial markets. But the finance ministry on Thursday said the election's impact will be limited.
The possibility of increased volatility in the domestic financial and foreign exchange market is expected to be limited, as much of the U.S. election risks are already reflected in our markets, and as the U.S. monetary and fiscal policies will mostly remain unchanged.
But many experts say short-term volatility is possible, especially in what one analyst sees as the worst-case scenario, the winner not being officially declared by the end of the year.
The least favorable thing in the financial market is uncertainty. The longer the circumstances that hamper investment decisions continue, the more volatility will increase. Such anxiety will likely lead to a fall in the stock market or a rise in interest rates and bring instability to the foreign exchange market.
The expert explained instability stems from the delay to economic stimulus measures and worsening investor sentiment amid COVID-19. But once there is a clear winner, stock markets will likely rise as the U.S. will pick up the postponed economic stimulus measures. Experts also hint that if Biden wins, eco-friendly businesses and the biohealth sector will benefit, whereas if Trump wins, the tech-heavy Nasdaq and the IT sector will strengthen. Watchers also say the U.S. dollar is likely to strengthen for the next couple of weeks amid uncertainty, but it will likely stabilize with a clear winner. Many experts think that Biden is more predictable than Trump.
Just by looking at their stances on trade, Biden has a multilateral approach and Trump has a bilateral approach. Having a multilateral approach means keeping the global standard, which increases predictability.
Amid external variables, the experts said Seoul may be able to reduce uncertainty and volatility through proper intervention and monitoring. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's current account surplus in September came to more than $10 billion for the first time in 2 years. According to the Bank of Korea, the surplus was $10.21 billion, an increase of about 32% on year. It was the fifth monthly surplus in a row, driven by a recovery in exports of semiconductors and cars. A senior ministry official said indicators suggest a rebound in the fourth quarter as well. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, Professor of Economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, despite the uncertainty in the U.S. election, stocks in New York were strongly higher overnight, led by tech stocks. The Dow up 1 1/3, the Nasdaq almost 4%. What's the story in the global markets?
As Mr. Biden's possibility of victory increases, U.S. market and other major markets in Europe and Asia all went up. It looks that market interprets Biden's victory with super physical stimulus over $3 trillion and more international trade by recovering previous multilateral trade agreement like NAFTA and TPP.
Yeah, and Korean stocks strongly higher today as well. With things as confused as they seem to be in the U.S., we might have expected more volatility, but what happened in the local markets?
Domestic market is also affected by Mr. Biden's leading in U.S. presidential campaign. Kospi gained 2.4% and Kosdaq also gained 2.2% today. Along with Mr. Biden's plan to fiscal package, it is also expected that zero interest rate and quantitative easing are continued for a while. It means that U.S. dollar will be more weakened and it will make more foreign investors to invest in Korean stock market.
Well, now the American election is getting so much attention in Korea in part because of its potential effects on the local economy and the markets. What stands out in particular to you on that front?
If Mr. Biden is elected as President of the United States, actually that's going to be a good news to Korean export and Korean economic recovery. President Trump, American first strategy in international trade made global trade smaller than before. So I think Mr. Biden will try to recover previously built free trade structure like NAFTA and TPP and FTA with Korea when he becomes the president of the United States.
If he does, yes, as we just heard in the last package, a more multilateral approach perhaps. Now, in terms of Korea's exports, what effect might we see if Joe Biden does indeed win the presidency? Which industries would benefit from that?
Actually, Mr. Biden's fiscal stimulus through eco-friendly policies can create great synergy and harmony with President Moon's Green New Deal plan. So it is highly expected that export will be hugely increased in environment-friendly products like hybrid vehicle and electric vehicle and other hydrogen vehicles. So environment-friendly products export will be increased more than before.
It's a sector where Korea has a lot of strength. Now, as we heard in the previous report, in September we saw that Korea posted a current account surplus of more than $10 billion for the first time in 2 years. And because exports actually rose, it put an end to this so-called recessionary surpluses where we had a surplus, but it was because exports and imports were both down. Now, it would seem this is part of an actual improvement perhaps in the situation. What do you say, Professor?
As we saw in previous report, in September, current account surplus exceeded $10 billion. But there was kind of structural changes in current account surplus in September. There was a larger increase in current account surplus due to robust export in memory chips and automobiles, and much less foreign travel by Korean people. So it is expected that this kind of positive momentum on current account surplus will be continued by the end of year at least. But still, there are quite a few uncertainties ahead on international trade, like spread of second pandemic and the result of U.S. presidential election and low oil price.
Well, continued strength in exports would certainly be welcome news for us here in Korea. Thanks so much, Professor, for sharing your insights today with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, of the babies born in South Korea last year, a record proportion of them were born to multicultural families. That's 18,000 babies, or almost 6% of the total. Multicultural, that is, Koreans born in families with a Korean and a foreign member. Now, it's the highest proportion since the figure was first compiled in 2008. The number of new marriages of Koreans to non-Korean citizens rose to around 25,000, accounting for 10.8% of all new marriages, which is a 9-year high. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.